Hi, everyone, and hi, Blake. Thank you so much for joining us today, and congratulations on a massive 150-point improvement to a 685 with a stellar 99th percentile DI score, a D85, and that to all of this in just about a month. So, big congrats to you.
Well, thank you so much. My win is a win for e-GMAT because your platform was the key to my success. So I could not have done any of it without e-GMAT. So I really thank you.
We're all so glad to have been a part of it. Now, you have just the most amazing story here, and you've done such a stellar job. Like I said, 150 points in about a month is not the kind of success that you hear about very often, but it's the kind of success a lot of people want. So let's take the time right now to really dive in, understand how you did what you did, so that other people can also take inspiration from your story. So let's really start right at the beginning, right? So when did you start preparing for the GMAT, and what were one of the first couple of considerations that you took into play?
Perfect. So I'm currently a college senior at the University of Arizona. So my
Mhm,
studying for the GMAT had to look a little bit flexible because
mhm,
I'm currently in college. My time is a little bit constrained. I wasn't really able to go and join classes because I already am in classes. So I needed a program that was more flexible and more self-study oriented. I
mhm,
started researching programs in January because I wanted to apply to 2+2 programs in April. I
mhm,
spent about a couple weeks just really familiarizing myself with the options out there, such as Princeton Review, the TTP,
mhm,
found e-GMAT, and I really looked into which programs had exactly what I needed. And after
mhm,
careful review, I found that e-GMAT was number one, the best price. It allowed me to study for 2 months for $200, complete access to all of their practice quizzes, their mock tests, all the videos that taught you the material. I thought that was 100% the best value on the market. And second, it was a self-study course, but they offered
mhm,
a lot of help as well. So
mhm,
although it was self-study, you could reach out to experts if you had any questions. You could actually talk to somebody. Their helpline is very quick to respond and very helpful.
mhm,
It didn't feel like you were just on an island on your own as you
mhm,
would be if you just went to NBA.com and you bought a book to study for
mhm,
the GMAT and just try to do practice problems. So
mhm.
taking all that into consideration, I thought the e-GMAT was the perfect course for me. And looking back, I am so thankful that I chose it.
So wait, like I said, congrats on the amazing score. But I know that you didn't start out with a 685. In fact, the score was 150 points lower than that, which you got from your first mock test. And
Yes.
on that first mock test, you actually scored a 535 with a D74, a V79, and a Q77. How did seeing that initial score really influence the paths that your GMAT study would take?
Well, I may let out a tear after I saw that. Honestly, it made me feel a little defeated because I thought
Mhm,
that this would be a lot quicker of a journey. I thought that I would
mhm,
just study a little bit. I'd be close to, an old GMAT 700, but I could study a little bit for it and it wouldn't be that hard. But
mhm,
I was kind of taken aback because it was a lot more difficult than I thought. And so at that time, I took the first mock at the end of January and I said, oh my gosh, I'm so far away from my target score. The equivalent to a old GMAT 700 is a GMAT Focus 635, I believe.
645.
Uh, 645. So I knew I had a lot to go, about 100 points to get to that 700 old score that I was targeting.
Oh, yeah.
So I uh I had this, moment where I really realized I need to put in a lot of work. Unfortunately, with my college schedule, I wasn't able to start honing in on my studying until the third week of February. I had a lot of
Hmm.
stuff going on outside of GMAT study. But
Of
looking at
course.
the 2+2 deferral program, I knew I had to take this test. The last available date I could take this test was April 2nd. So I
Hmm.
scheduled my time for that exam. I locked it in. And from that third week in February, I was 100% dedicated to studying for the GMAT and improving my score as much as I possibly could before I take the test.
Understood. And I know you definitely put in a lot of effort across all three different subsections. let's break this down. Let's work from verbal to quant to DI. On the
Mhm.
verbal section, especially, I know that as you're a native speaker, you're someone who's not unfamiliar with the English language, reading, writing, comprehending, but you did spend a significant amount of time going through the master comprehension course. How useful was that in your preparation, and how useful is it to acing the GMAT?
Yeah, so being a native speaker, obviously I've grown up reading and writing in English, taking tests in English. I would say that the GMAT isn't your typical English structure. And what I mean by that is if you read a published article or you read a book, the author's job it is, because they want to sell a lot of books, is to make their book as digestible as possible.
Mhm.
They're going to write in a way that you're able to comprehend fully and really get their point across. They're going to use shorter sentences. They're going to use less adjectives. They're not going to try to confuse you. The GMAT is the opposite of that. They're going to give you very long, complicated sentences that you need to know how to break down, take the points out of it that you need to answer the questions, and really get the information they're trying to get across. And then you have a time limit for it. So
Mhm.
before I started doing e-GMAT, my strategy was to read this really long, complicated sentence and then take statement A and read statement A and then go back and read the sentence again. Say, does that work? And no.
Mhm.
Okay, let's move on to statement B and read statement B and go up. This wasted so much time. So I started out with the master comprehension course,
Mhm.
which in a way taught me how to read. And again,
Mhm.
being a native speaker, I know how to read and write in English, but I didn't know how to read properly for the GMAT. And what I
Mhm.
mean by this is the master comprehension will teach you how to stop at certain points, sit back and think, okay, what did those 5 words just say? How do they relate to the previous 5 words? How does
Mhm.
this relate to the whole picture? And then
Mhm.
move on. After I was done with the master comprehension, I didn't have to read the sentence more than once because
Oh,
I was
wow.
able to extract all the information, make a little diagram of what the sentence is saying. And then as I evaluated the sentence, I just lined it up to my diagram or my
Mhm.
mental understanding of the picture. And I was able to say, no, 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 yes, maybe. And then you go on another one, and you're like, oh, no, this is the right one. And then you're able to select it and move on. You don't have to go back and reread.
That must have saved you a whole lot of time. And I'm sure also
Mhm.
given you a lot of peace of mind because you had that extreme certainty in the answer that you were really picking. So that's really wonderful to hear. I'm glad that it helped you out so much,
Yeah,
right?
on the saving time aspect of it, when I first took my mock GMAT, I did not finish any of the sections. I didn't
Hmm.
finish the verbal comprehension section. When I took the actual GMAT, I had 7 minutes left on the verbal that I could go back and see what problems I, struggled on or whatever. But I had so much time allotted left from
Hmm.
when I first started.
7 minutes is, I'm shocked because I actually didn't know this number till now, but 7 minutes is a whole lot of time. And
Yeah.
I think that just shows the extreme efficiency and precision you must have had going into each and every question and
Hmm.
the really strong decision making that you made as you were confronting each and every question on the test. So kudos to you on that. Really, really well done.
Thank
Right?
you.
So great job. Now, moving on to quant, I know that being a college senior and with your specific area of study, I'm sure some certain things were not unfamiliar to you. How did the structure of the quant course enable you to move efficiently through quant prep?
Yeah, so for those that don't know in this interview, I'm studying statistics and data science. So I have a pretty strong math background. But the GMAT covers topics that I have not done in a really long time. They cover very specific algebra topics, permutations, word problems that I probably haven't seen since high school, that type of problem. So the e-GMAT was awesome in the way that every single module, every single topic that they taught you had a diagnostic quiz that you could take a GMAT focus or GMAT, 5 GMAT style questions. And then after that, there was a concept quiz. So they
Mhm.
give you, I'm going to say, easier than GMAT style questions that really just test what areas do you not understand to solve these GMAT questions, because there are a lot of different topics that you have to put together to solve a GMAT question. So these learning concept quizzes allowed you to say, I really don't understand how this specific manipulation technique in an algebra problem. And then there's a whole lesson on how to just do that.
Mhm.
And this was actually really helpful for me to, one, learn the concepts behind how to solve GMAT problems. Instead of just taking a bunch of problems, trying to figure it out, and wasting a lot of time, I was able to learn the concepts behind them and then efficiently apply the concepts. And two, it saved me time because I knew some areas really well and I didn't in other areas. So I didn't really have to dive deep into the areas that I knew really well. I could kind of move on for those and take more time to study the areas that I was deficient in, improve on
Mhm.
those.
Understood. But that's, I think, really, really smart planning, especially because you were on a time crunch. So that efficiency was paramount. It was the need of the hour, right? So
Yeah.
one thing I know that also helped you in quant prep was Scholranium. So
Mhm.
what is Scholranium to you, first of all, and what role did it really play in your GMAT prep?
Yeah, so once you, like I said, the structure of it, you take these learning quizzes, you go through the concepts, and then you solve GMAT style questions. And in one subsection of the GMAT, so let's just say word problems, there are a bunch of different modules. One module is ratios, one module is sales, one module is percent, something like that, right? And there are all these different modules. Then you go through. Scholarium is a chance to apply this subsection, a whole subsection of word problems, and take a practice quiz just like the GMAT on that subsection. So after you go through all the concept files and you feel that you've learned the material, then it's time to go into what e-GMAT calls cementing. And you
Mhm.
go into Scholarium and you take a practice quiz of 10 problems or so from that subsection, and you see how well you do on them. Some of my favorite features about this platform alone is that one, you're able to keep track of all the problems that you've solved. So I was able to see where I started on my journey and
Mhm.
where I finished on my journey. And that was really cool to see what areas I was really weak in, what subsections I was doing better than the other ones, and
Mhm.
devote more time to the weaker areas. And another thing too is that after you solve the problems, excuse me,
Mhm.
after you solve the problems, Scholarium gives you a very detailed solution and
Mhm.
not just telling you what answer was right and exactly how to solve it. They tell you which processes to apply. And you're able
Mhm.
to match up those processes to the concept files and say,
Mhm.
okay, they started out with diagramming and assigning these different variables and assigning different names. I'm pretty weak on that. I don't understand that. Well, guess what? There's a concept file exactly for how to assign variable names to different numbers, that kind of stuff. I can go back and study that and then come back. And now I have the process down. I can try to solve more problems.
Oh, wonderful. So it was really kind of a synchronized routine between what you learned here, what you understood in the solution, what you needed to further enhance through the course. And that
Mm-hmm.
process really helped you push your score on the quant side of things. Very well done. Really, really well
Thank
done.
you.
Right? Okay. But now I think, yeah.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. But now we come to the big thing, right? The big section, which is data insights. One, I know
Yes.
that personally you wanted to do really, really well in this section, and a
Yes.
massive 11-point jump is just applause worthy, quite frankly,
Thank you.
right?
Thank you.
So tell us all, how did you really make that improvement? What were the key processes that enabled an 11-point improvement to the 99th percentile?
Yeah, so it really just took studying the GMAT style questions and the processes involved with that. So like I said, I'm a data science major, so
Mhm.
I should do well on it, but I wasn't doing well on it when I first started out. And that's because it was just different than what I study in school. There wasn't any, linear regression or doing, statistical analysis on variance on the test. It was more of looking at a graph and seeing, is this statement sufficient enough to solve a problem? So it was a
Mhm.
different style of problem. There were four subsections of the data insights, and I felt that a few of them I was naturally really good at. So graphs and tables, I think I spent one day on because that's pretty similar to what I do all day in school. I just
Mhm.
realized that I needed to take more time and read the problem correctly. But there were other hard ones like data sufficiency was very difficult. And I think the reason data sufficiency was really hard for me, it was very advanced techniques in the verbal reasoning combined with very advanced techniques in the quant reasoning. And that's pretty much what the data insight is. It's a combination of the two other sections put together. And I thought data sufficiency was just the hardest for me. So I spent the most time on that trying to get better and better at it. The multi-source reasoning, again, I thought that was relatively easy. I just had to learn strategies on slowing down, pre-thinking, making my diagrams that I did in the verbal section, really understanding the problem. And one thing I want to say that I thought this was not good advice, but it turned out to be the best advice I got, is take that 30 seconds and diagram the problem and really break down, especially for the data insights, break down those complex questions, break down the complex information into a diagram. And like, for example, the multi-source reasoning, you're going to get asked 3 or 4 questions on the same data set. So take 2 or 3 minutes to really understand that data set, draw connections, make the pictures that you need. And then when you get to the question part, you'll be able to answer the questions in 20, 30 seconds because you already have all the information there instead of skipping over that part and having to look back for 2 minutes and find the information passage.
Absolutely. Solid advice. So it was really that focus on comprehension process and pre-thinking that made this improvement really happen for you, right?
Yeah, correct. And the ability to just take a step back and spend 30 seconds to set up the problem before you try to solve the problem. Another thing I struggled with timing, especially on the data insights problem. I think when I took my first mock test, I only finished 16 or 17 out of the 21 questions. So learning how to more efficiently solve the problems and get to the answer quicker, which comes into play of pre-thinking and critically analyzing the problem before you try and solve it, was key to getting my time down.
Understood. Phenomenal job. I've said that before. I'll say it again probably another 3-4 times as we go through, but we've just done such a great job at your entire preparation, right?
Thank you.
Okay. But now you had your verbal in hand, you had your quant in hand, you had your data insights in hand, and then you had to really put all those 3 things together and bring everything else home in the mock test. How did you actually plan out your test taking strategy as you went through mocks? How did that evolve from your first mock test with a 535 all the way to the last test?
Yeah, so my journey, macro view of my journey, I took the first mock test, spent a couple weeks off, then studied really hard for 4 weeks. And then after that 4 weeks, I had about a week and a half before my GMAT official test. So at that point, I said to myself, I just want to take mock tests from here on out. So I just took a mock test pretty much every other day. And the first mock test I did was really good coming out of the studying. I think it was a 675 was my first mock. And then as I took 2 more throughout the week, they slowly were going downhill. And what I realized was that I was getting burned out. I was doing too much. And so I had to balance that with studying and preparing for the test. But I'll get back to that in a second. So you asked about, what strategy is on the test. One of the best parts about the GMAT focus is that it allows you to go back and reselect up to 3 questions. So I knew going in which areas were my weakest. For example, on the data insights portion, the data sufficiency problems that specifically referred to rates and percent changes were my weakest. I tried my best. I spent a lot of time, but I just knew that I could solve all the other ones really well after my studying, but that one was still just not really clicking with me. So what I did is when I first encountered a problem like that, my strategy was to visualize it the best I could, make the chart, make the diagram, fill in the variables. And then if I, got to a point that I personally knew through a bunch of practice problems that this is where I'm still struggling with, I said, I'm going to save the time. I'm going to put an answer and I'm going to move on. Then I bookmarked that problem at the very end because of all the time I was able to save with pre-thinking and solving the other problems more efficiently, I had extra time and I was able to go back to these really tough problems that I struggled with and try to see if I could get a good answer for it instead of just a guess.
And that's really, really smart because this way you didn't waste a whole lot of time by digging your heels in this question and probably sacrificing your last couple of questions due to a lack of time. You realized that once you'd hit the wall, there was no point in banging your head against it any longer.
Yeah.
Move forward and then came back and tried the problem again.
And one very, very important part that I learned actually, I think 4 days before I took my test, the GMAT penalizes you for unanswered questions. So like the SAT, I was still thinking the ACT in my mind where if I don't finish 2 problems, like it's just wrong. It doesn't really matter. GMAT is not like that. They will penalize you. So you need to get through the problems. And that's why e-GMAT is awesome. They tell you to efficiently solve, they teach you how to efficiently solve the problems and get to the right answer. But if there's ever one that you just don't know and you're in the moment, you just have to move on and make sure you have enough time to answer the other questions.
100%, 100%. And then I think all of that coalesced really, really well on the exam day for you, where now, of course, we sit with that 685 and you preparing for all of the next steps. So congrats, really, really well done.
Thank you.
Right? But I want to touch upon a few more things. One is that, as we know now, you are a college student. So taking exams, preparing for tests, that's nothing new for you. But I can understand that the GMAT was still a bit of a unique challenge. Why was that so?
It's a different style of test than a college exam or any school exam. A school exam is pretty straightforward. They give you the information in a lecture, and then you pretty much memorize the information. Even as a math major, you memorize, certain how to solve these like very specific problems. And then when you take a test, the tests are always similar, if not exactly the same as the content that they already gave you, because that's their point. Teach, learn, test on the information. The GMAT is a lot more process-oriented because they're going to give you problems that you've never seen before and different wordings that you've never seen before. It's not just, I have this type of problem and they're going to change the numbers on it and I just have to know, I can memorize, how to specifically solve this problem. It doesn't work like that, unfortunately. You have to learn the processes and the mechanics behind solving these problems. For example, algebra, you have to learn how to do these manipulation techniques because the problem that you see on the GMAT is not guaranteed to be anywhere close to the problem that you've seen in practice, but the way that you solve it will be similar in applying these different manipulation techniques. So it's a much more process-oriented exam that you can't just memorize.
I think very, very well said. And I think it's an important mental shift that people have to make when they're really setting out to prepare for the GMAT. Yeah. Okay. So then you've done this 150-point improvement in about 5 weeks, right? Including your mock tests, about 5 weeks. What do you think are the essential features or the roadmap that people need to follow if they are also trying to make a large-scale improvement in their GMAT score?
I think the first most important step is to take a mock test, whether it be an official mock test or an e-GMAT mock test, because you have to be honest with yourself where you're at. We all come from different backgrounds. We all come from different areas. It's easy to say, for me, it's easy to say, I come from a data science background. The data insights portion is going to be super easy. And it wasn't the case. So taking that first mock test is just the best way to be honest with yourself and see where you're at. Next, e-GMAT gives you a wonderful study planner. You're able to enter in exactly what scores that you got, and they'll give you kind of a roadmap on where you should start, how much time you should spend in different sections, and that kind of stuff. I thought that was very helpful, and I stuck roughly to that as far as like which sections in order I should go. But I think the next step is learning the mechanics and learning the processes behind the problems. It's very tempting to just get maybe a poor score and say, okay, I just need to do more practice problems and go out and buy the 1,000 practice problems from MBA.com. And guess what? If you don't spend the time learning the processes behind these problems, how to solve them, techniques to break these down, you're going to continuously get the same score. Nothing's going to improve because it's not a memorization test. So the next step I would say is to learn the processes. And then finally, as you go through the e-GMAT course, take the practice mocks. It's very, very important to give yourself a rest period. It's very important to not spend 12 hours a day studying. It's important to, take some time off because that rest is productive rest. It's going to allow your brain a chance to experience other things and come back, and you'll be able to see problems differently, and you'll be a lot sharper. Something that I did before my test, I took these mock tests. Like I said, I was decreasing every single test that I took. And I think the last mock test I took before my GMAT was a 610. And it wasn't because I didn't know the information. I just felt so blah when I took it. I felt so drained after a week of really hard studying. So instead of continuing that and saying, oh, I don't know this or I don't know that, I took 2 days off. I think I studied 1 hour in those 2 days of kind of some problems that I wasn't too familiar with. And then I went and took the test, and I was as sharp as I could be after all that time studying, and it worked out for me in the end. But that process of take a mock test, learn the processes, take some more mock tests, rest, and then go take the test.
Wonderful. I think that's a really great step-by-step guide for people to really follow as they move through their preparation. So super, super helpful advice, right?
Awesome.
But yes, as we close out, as we kind of bring this interview to an end, is there any last kind of nugget of advice that you want to leave for people as they embark upon this journey on their own?
I would say it's going to be okay. It's going to work out in the end. And know going in, be able to properly assess how much time you can give to the GMAT. Looking back, that's maybe something I regret a little bit, is not extenuating my study time more than a month. I'm happy for the score improvement that I did, and I thank e-GMAT for being just the absolute cornerstone of that whole month of studying. But I don't think that you should strive to do that. Take some more time, realize how it fits into your life, and realize the time commitment you can give every single day, and take every day as a learning opportunity. There were some moments that I felt just rock bottom. I felt that I was going to get another 500 on the GMAT. I was taking practice problems. They weren't going very well. I went to bed, I got up the next morning, and I just kept chipping away. So it's going to be okay. You're going to get through it, and you're going to hit your goal no matter what. I can promise you that. As long as you don't give up, you'll get there.
Absolutely. Wonderful, stellar advice. Right. And I think we'll end on that high note. So congrats once again, Blake, for the amazing score that you've got, for the amazing advice that you've given today. Thank you so, so much. From all of us at e-GMAT, all the very, very best for your next steps. We'll all keep our fingers crossed for you.
Thank you.
And to everyone out there, I hope that Blake's story served as an inspiration for you to take your own first steps into the GMAT. All the very best. Happy learning and take care. Bye, everyone.